Hello and welcome to the Japan Zoominar at UC San Diego. It's March 2nd, 2021. And in fact, in Japan, it's March 3rd, Hinamatsuri, the festival of women, girls, and puppets, I guess. I'm Ulrike Schaede. I'm the professor of Japanese business at UC San Diego and director of JFIT, the Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology. JFIT is at GPS, the School of Global Policy and Strategy in beautiful San Diego. We are an international relations and public policy school with a focus on the Pacific. We offer 7 degree programs, including a master's in international affairs with a Japan specialization. If you're interested in this, please go to our website, which is gps.ucsd.edu. And JFIT is our Japan Center at GPS, and you can learn more about our activities there at jfit.ucsd.edu. On that website, you can also sign up for our newsflash, which is sort of an anti-Japan newsflash. It doesn't give you news that are already in the news, but some background stories. And right next to that tab, News and Media, is the Japan Zoominars tab, where you can find recordings of past Zoominars. These Zoominars are weekly events. We meet every Tuesday, 4:30 San Diego time, which is, of course, Wednesdays, 9:30 Tokyo time during the winter. And here's a lineup for our upcoming events. Already, today, of course, we'll talk about marketing. We'll have Richard Samuels from MIT talk about Japanese politics and public policy next week, followed by Japan's space policies with Sadia Pekkanen. And Alice Krauss. And then Louise Young will take us to back into Japan of the 1930s to see whether we can better understand 1/6 in the US. And then finally, on March 30th, we'll have Professor Chung Young-il, who in Japan goes under his Japanese name Yuichi Tei. And he is the Dean of the Kanagawa School of Health Innovation and will review with us Japan's response to the pandemic, and there will be, of course, an underlying theme of will the Olympics happen or not. Please note that our March events are in part supported by the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science in San Francisco, and we're very grateful for the support. On March 30th at 5:30, after the event with Professor Tay, we will have an intro section to their fellowship programs. So if that's of interest, if you're a PhD student or professor working on Japan-related issues, please join us to learn how they might be able to fund you. By the way, since this is a marketing event, let me say one more little thing before I introduce our guests today about how you can get notifications from us. We have a weekly email campaign, and if you do not get it, please check whether you have our email set up as a VIP contact, because otherwise it might end up in promotions or other sort of folders. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or my own website, thejapanologist.com, where I also post the events. Please note that our Zoominars are recorded, and you can find past events on our website. This means that I will, when you ask questions in the chat function today, only refer to you by your first name to protect your privacy. Alrighty, that's my website, and here is our guest today. So let me stop the PowerPoint so I can introduce them to you. Here they are. We have Gary and Cauitie. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to see you. And so let me introduce you first. So we have Cauitie Ocada, who is the founder and CEO of Ocada and Partners, which is a Tokyo-based consultancy that helps business owners and managers in their marketing and brand strategy needs. Cauitie has an MS in engineering from Keio and an MBA from the University of Southern California. Go Trojans, Cauitie. And thank you for joining us. You spent 30 years of your career at Dentsu and are now an independent marketing expert. So you're a great guest to have. And we'll learn a lot from you about current marketing trends.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Ulrike.
And then we have Gary Bremermann, And Gary is born and raised in San Diego and earned his undergraduate degree at UC Santa Barbara in environmental studies, Gary. And then he graduated from GPS, which was IRPS at the time. I believe you were the class of 1991, is that right?
91, yep, the
91.
third graduating class. One
of our very first graduating groups. And Gary is the founder and CEO of Leaders Labo. He's a recruiter and a coach. He organizes workshops. He helps people find good careers and shape their own careers. And above everything else, Gary, I would also say you are a connector. I checked on LinkedIn and we have 170 mutual connections. That's your job, not mine. So Gary has been the heart and soul of the GPS Alumni Association in Tokyo for the last, 30 years. And you've been just fantastic in official functions and also as a shadow shogun, as I'd like to call you. And so thank you for everything you've done for the school. And it's absolutely terrific to have you here. I think I should also mention that you are at PowerUp Solutions, and also you can introduce the other things if you want later. All right. So enough of me talking. Let's hand the microphone over to you guys, and I've asked you to prepare just a short initial statement, sort of the three things we should know about Japanese marketing. And then we'll start a conversation. And audience, you are invited to put your questions into the chat function. We'll have a large group of people here today, so we will not get to everybody's question. I will try to build your questions into the conversation and also share your comments with our two guests later after the show is over. So Cauitie, why don't we start with you and have you share just a few thoughts on what we really ought to be paying attention to with Japanese marketing today.
Yeah. Thank you, Ulrike, again for invitation. On the good morning here, but good evening. The people. I was looking at the number of audience is increasing to the almost 100. And amazing. Welcome to the session. And my name is Koichi Okada, and as a matter of fact, the English is not my first language, so I tend to be a little bit slower than you, Ulrike, definitely, and so please allow that. And the very first of all, it's like in the Japanese businessman. I would like to start with the lightly introducing myself. I've been staying with the company Dentsu for 30 years, and I was acquitted 6 years ago to create a very small boutique. They're working closely to the company management. To develop the brand or the organizational strategy chiefly, and so the brand marketing organization are currently in my the field. However, there of course you may think so. Any kind of the problem. The near the managements are the mind. So I'm working probably the wider range than Dentsu. And in Dentsu are probably most of you are thinking Dentsu is an advertising company. However, I spent probably more than half career in the business of the brand related, and which means in my definition the brand the business is more like just marketing communication. So when I was very young, I used to work in advertising, domestically and internationally. However, I started together with my, the elder, the colleagues, for to create the small, the brand expert, the organization, in-house organization, which probably you may call, if that was in the States, you may call it consultancy. So, I've been working with, the brand consulting, for more than 15 years before I quit, the Dentsu to start, the small business. At that time, by the way, the Dentsu was, working seriously for buying the Aegis Group, a UK-based, the large, the advertising company, advertising conglomerate. So, there, every, like every, organization, the Dentsu also, the swang between, the right and left. And at that time, the Dentsu stepped back a little bit toward the conventional, their advertising agency. So that's a, the one of the, the drive, that I quit. And the Ulrike asked me, the three, the change. I know, that most of you are in the States, and a little bit, separate from current, the contemporary, the Japan status. Chiefly the COVID-19, the situation. So, I share my, the light, the observation, the very briefly, 1, 2, 3. And first, the Japan today is not much, that different from, the what you know. See, the Japanese are Japanese, and Japan and Japan. And however, everything's probably, the becoming slow. The people seems to be waiting for getting back situation. That is one thing. And secondly, the people are today, probably it is the same as in Europe or in the States. But also in Japan, people looking inside, internally, the orientation. That is, the second. And thirdly, the work style probably has changed. And many people, that start remote, the basis. That is probably the biggest, the change. And of course, the consequence, the effect are, the spread slowly. So those are, the three very quick, observation, at COVID. The Gary, sorry, I spent too much.
All right, let's Gary, let's see what you think we should sort of kickstart our conversation with. So the three things that are on top of your list.
You got it, and thanks for the very kind introduction. Just a little bit more about my background. For the last 20 years, I've been working as a recruiter here in Tokyo, and my focus has been entirely on advertising and marketing professionals. So that's where I'm coming from here. And so with the rule of three, I've put together a suite of 3 threes. I'm going to make it really quick. 3 caveats, 3 explosions, and 3 current trends in marketing in Japan. So the 3 caveats: I'm not a marketing expert. I'm a marketing observer. So as I just mentioned, the last 20 years, I've had a front row seat on the world of advertising and marketing in Japan. I'm really grateful for having that opportunity. It's something that I fell into 20 years ago, and I feel very blessed to be where I am. So my expertise comes from observing changes in market demand for marketing professionals, and the changes in terms of the type of skills and experience that companies are looking for to hire for their marketing organizations. The other thing that has given me an advantage on the subject is that front row seat. I get to collaborate with Japan's top marketing experts because they come to me to help find people, and they also share their hopes, their dreams, their struggles, their challenges, the threats that they face from competition. So it's really interesting to hear from a lot of various sources on what's happening in their business. I work with large ad agencies, I work with big brands, but I also work with startups and independent agencies. So I get to see the world from different angles. The number 2 caveat, marketing is a broad subject with very, very many disciplines. So when people think of marketing, they think of advertising. And advertising's a very visible subset of marketing, but there's a lot of other disciplines other than the cool ads you see on TV and hear on the radio or read in a magazine or look at online. So I'll talk about a number of different marketing disciplines as we go along. Caveat number 3, I saw the guest list for today. Super intimidating. There are a bunch of really top marketing experts on here, so please go easy on me. If you have feedback or questions, please put them in the comment section in the chat thing. I'll address your questions either today or later. Now to the 3 explosions. So I lived here in the 80s. I came back in 1999, and the 3 things that were driving change in marketing in Japan were all due to the internet. So you saw, well, mainly due to the internet, but you saw the explosion in the number and diversity of media channels. So, you know, at that time, especially in the 80s, you had the 5 national newspapers, you had 6 nationwide TV networks. So media channels were very concentrated. And it's still true today that TV is king. So despite all the change, TV is still a huge factor in, at least in marketing communications through advertising. But we have all these different media channels now. So my daughter's 20, she rarely watches broadcast TV. She's on her phone or on her tablet or even on our TV watching YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So that the 90s kind of set it off, and we're still in the process of that fragmentation and diversification of media sources. Number 2, the big trend is the explosion in available data. When I was a student at UCSB and at UCSD, I went to the library and the card catalog and looked things up. Now all of that is in my pocket with the iPhone. So we have tons of data and we have tools to analyze it. And that's become much more important in terms of its application to marketing. And then the third explosion is the explosion in products and services. So so many more products and so many more options for your time, attention, and money. You have Kickstarter, where people can have an idea and get crowdfunded to get something produced. The competition is fierce. So big explosion in the variety and different numbers of products and services. Now that leads to 3 current marketing trends that I want to highlight. And there are a lot of trends, but these are 3 that I thought would be interesting to talk about. One is the blurring of lines between traditional marketing service agencies and the emergence of new players, as well as some companies moving activities in-house that they used to outsource to agencies. So a subject that I've been interested over the years is how the lines between a traditional full service ad agency, a digital ad agency, a direct marketing agency, and now you see the big consultancies like Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, BCG, McKinsey, they're all moving into the marketing area and they're all competing for marketing dollars. PR agencies are making advertisements. Social media has created opportunities for independent players to come in. Cyber Agent has been a big player in terms of putting celebrities onto the web back in the day. You see influencer agencies like is a publicly traded influencer platform, influencer agency, whatever you want to talk about it. They have, I think, 8 of the top 10 YouTubers. So there are new players, there are old players with lines blurring, and these big consultancies coming in because they have the expertise in implementation of technology. So you have these big marketing platforms like Adobe Marketing Cloud, Salesforce Marketing Suite, whatever they call it. Oracle's got marketing technology products. And the consultancies are the ones that are coming in and selling them. but then they're also adding additional creative services selling to these big clients through the C-suite rather than selling to the marketing director. And then one more point on the blurring of lines is companies moving creative people in-house. So about a decade ago, maybe longer, Coca-Cola established the Creative Excellence Center inside their company, and we're hiring ad agency people to do jobs that they used to go to the ad agencies for, or at least oversee the quality of their creative production from the agencies. Apple has brought a lot of stuff in-house. They're hiring top creative people from the agencies to do that work in-house. So that's still a trend that's happening. Trend number 2 is no matter what your job is in marketing, data literacy is essential. So you don't need to be a data scientist, but you have to understand how data is collected and analyzed, because someone's going to come to sell you something based on their black box data scheme. And you as a senior executive or decision maker have to understand what went into that black box and if you're being sold something of true value or a lot of smoke and mirrors. So, and luckily you can study it online. And then the last thing before we get into the conversation is the increasing importance of product marketers and the demand for people in disciplines like customer experience, CX, user experience, UX, service design, and innovation. So in the job market, I'm seeing a lot of demand for people with design-based applications to solving business problems. So design thinking is a trendy thing, but UX designers are in demand, and there's a shortage of people. Product marketing, because we have data, we're better to understand what consumers' interests and needs are, and then designing product to fit those needs. So competition is fierce. It's a great time to be a marketer, and it's a great time to be a marketer in Japan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's a great start. So I'm sitting here wondering though, so what you're talking about, Gary, are both of you, sort of exogenous shocks, right? So there's a technology shock, there is a competitive shock of other people coming in, and an industry shock in terms of what it takes to be successful. How has the traditional Japanese marketing industry reacted to this? I mean, we could talk about Dentsu or the big 3 of Japan. I mean, are they typically slow, like a lot of Japanese companies are accused of being in terms of reacting to this, or are they actually like right there at the technology frontier, hiring different types of people, building different types of in-house skills to react to this? What's the competitive dynamic in the Japanese market?
Okay, Ulrike, I don't know, that if I, that correctly, the answer to that, the question, probably halfway, the adding lines to, what, the Gary said, that I really like, those, the summary, Gary, and listening, to what explaining the current, the Japan, I remind, how, the Japanese, traditional, the company like, the Dentsu or Ocada or those, the Macom, the big guys doing the business with clients. You said, Gary, instead of, the agency, more number of, the consultancy get into the, the client side. What did you say? The PwC or Accenture? Or, yeah, those companies. That is true. While traditional, the agencies looks a little bit slow in a surface, and the probably one of the the reason is the Dentsu Ocada, and I used to be the account executive at Dentsu. And how we depends on the day-to-day, the mingling, the conversation with the client. So that is, the what I, the thought. And then probably, more, we spent, a lot of, the time with not necessarily, the purpose-based, conversation in general, and, the keeping, the good relationship with, the clients chiefly. And then, at the end of the, the conversation, the clients, they ask us, the summer projects a little bit. And then, they're bringing back to the office. We are, solving something and then bring back with proposals. And those are the kind of a little bit of an exaggeration. However, they're, typical, the course. Probably that inefficiency, is now, the change, the more efficient, the manner, or American, the manner at, the clients. So that was, my, the thought. And also, I thought, the client's name, that you mentioned, Gary, were mostly, the non-traditional, the Japanese, non-Japanese, the name, like, Coca-Cola, or you mentioned some other, the
Apple.
Apple, or, those, the Western, and the clients. But the still, the old type, the Japanese clients are doing pretty much the similar thing, that we did in the past.
Could I just, oh, sorry, Cauitie, go ahead.
And, let me add another, the line to, what Gary said, in the States, that probably you change, the people, you change, human resources, when, the things are, the changing over time. However, in Japan, we are typically, the keeping, the people inside of the, the company so far. So that is the probably, the one of the, the source of, the slow, the change surfacely. However, I'm a kind of, the fan of, the slow changing, keeping, the HR, the practice of, the most of the Japanese in the client. And because, I believe, I still believe those, the keeping, the peoples are definitely, the keeping the culture of, the company, and which probably make, the Japanese, many Japanese, companies alive.
So that's very interesting. It's actually, we have a comment from Nozomi, who says it very well, and said, isn't that still really, credibility, trustworthiness are still important, and an important part of everyday Japanese business life. So you'll need, any agency will need people that can build these relationships, right? And then where it gets more complicated, whether that's the data or the new technical product launchings, could actually migrate into new fields. So some sort of division of labor. He asked this as a question, so let's ask this as a question. Is that what you see? Is that there's a division of labor, that there's part of it is the old Japan as we used to know it, and part of it is sort of the new teched up part of the business?
Okay. May I chime in on that?
Sure.
So as a follow-up to Koichi's point, I'm with you. I agree that trust and building relationships is huge. That said, things are changing. If I recall correctly, I think Dentsu announced 2 weeks ago a loss of $1.5 billion, and that they will be cutting 6,000 people worldwide. Now, it's likely they'll be cutting people outside of Japan because the labor laws here are so protective of employees here that it's very difficult to make cuts. But when you have an extraordinary loss, you are able to shed jobs. I know that quite a few people there and at other firms are looking for new places to work. And they're interested in these kind of smaller, nimbler upstarts where they may be given more responsibility and more of a challenge. So Cauitie, I completely agree with you on the importance of the human-to-human relationships and building trust. That will never go away. But the ecosystem and the foundations of the old ways are shifting finally. After those explosions in the 90s, I think we're really seeing some major shifts.
So are there things, so we've talking about these changes, right? But are there things that are not changing that should be changing? So we just talked about trust will always be there. It's a way of Japanese business. And there are Japanese business norms around what is the appropriate behavior in terms of client acquisition and how clients are treated. And that'll stay, and that's great. But are there things that Japanese marketing companies are doing, broadly defined, that are really that should be changing and aren't, that are holding the industry back?
Ulrike, I think I have to to come back to my the very initial the 3 points, but before that simply and very shortly and quickly the reply to the Nozomi-san's the question, and I think that it is, we are still heavily depending on the credibility of an organization and also on people. So that the practice has not changed, even though some the Japanese company are much more looking around, starting looking around the abilities in a market. And so if some very new company show the ability of the solving problems, that they probably have a larger chance than the before us. But still, comparing to other countries like the China, or as far as in the States, Europe, our dependency on the credibility is enormous here. And I said in my very first note, I used the language of slow, and to be honest, do not know well what is happening in the States, because the currently we have far less number of non-Japanese people in Tokyo today. And so Japanese societies are looking internally, and the people are not people do not the same are interested in other the countries. I'm worrying a little bit about that tendency. See,
that may be a global trend, actually. I mean, if you watch American news right now, you think there's no other country in the world than the United States, and that's been always actually a little bit the case, because large countries can do that, right? And smaller countries are often more interested in other places, but I think that's a common phenomenon right now, that we're all concerned with what's going on at home, right?
Okay. Thank you for following up. It's a little bit the sad to see even the large organization in Japan looking inside, in my sense, comparing to the previous thing. So I cannot, mention about, the States, what happened in the States. However, probably comparing to other the countries, the change of Japan is very slow.
So we had Karen Shire here, who was actually saying that from a sociologist perspective, for change to be meaningful, it has to be slow. Societies, industries don't change overnight. If something changes overnight, it's probably going to revert back to the previous equilibrium, right? So if we want to see change, we should be a little bit patient and look at the, and look at the slow movement. So I think that's not a bad thing, but and Japan has always been slow. I think slow is actually what Japanese society prefers in terms of the speed of change also. So we have a question from Jessup, who wants to know, this actually is to the point. He has a question for Gary and for Cauitie. The question to Gary is, what advice would you give a foreigner who would like to work in marketing in Japan? And for Cauitie, the question is, what do you believe foreigners can bring to Japanese companies? I mean, can foreign companies or people be change agents in this at this particular moment in time? Gary, you want to take that first, and then we'll
go. Sure. And Jessup, I wanted to get back to the question on what hasn't changed and should, and that will naturally transition to your question. So one of the things that hasn't changed and should is even in marketing and advertising, which is thought of as being a open-minded, liberal, creative, free thinking sector of the economy, is discrimination is still a very huge problem that hasn't changed enough, in my humble opinion. And yeah, change is slow. I'm okay with that. I get it. It's to be meaningful. It's taking time, but it's taken a long time. And in the recruitment side of the house is, I still get job descriptions that say we need a male or we need a female. We need someone of this age. People still ask in job interviews, are you married? Do you plan to have children? How old are you? There is discrimination based on age, race, sex, physical appearance, sexual orientation. Discrimination is rampant in the job market, and it's not just a Japan problem, but I've found over the years it's a bit more open here. I ran a company in the United States in the 90s, and I knew what I could and couldn't ask in a job interview. And here we are, it's 2021, and people are still being asked extremely invasive and personal questions that lead to discriminatory decisions about who gets a job and who doesn't. So that hasn't changed enough, and it should. In terms of advice for a foreign person getting a job here, one of the biggest hurdles has been language. And so you find really talented people with limited or conversational Japanese. They feel comfortable having a conversation, but they don't read or write. So most of the job orders that come to me, 90% of my placements are native Japanese with business level or higher English. In the remaining 10%, it's non-Japanese people who have passed the N1 exam or have near native equivalency, reading and writing, and especially in marketing communications, where you're seeing opportunities for non-Japanese in the market here is if it's an data analytics job, it's very numbers based, and you could have fairly basic Japanese. You could be an expert in something, and a company will assign a translator for you for times when you need to have Japanese language. And where I also see an opportunity for non-Japanese people is to work at Japanese headquarters to help companies expand globally. And with the demographic shift, the decline in population, you've wrote, Ulrike, a lot about that. The hidden champions, or these companies, they're world leaders in their market sector, and they need people who can help them further penetrate international markets. So there's opportunities there. The challenge is integrating and actually being given opportunities to grow in the job. But there are jobs out there. I'm currently working on something for a major international brand, Japanese brand headquartered in Tokyo. They have a new chief digital officer coming in from overseas, and that person is building a team here for their global business, and Japanese language is not a requirement for it. So if you have world-class skills and you have Japanese fluency, it doesn't matter who you are. There's a job for you here.
So then, Cauitie, the gaijin as a change agent, right? That's an old topic actually, but with a new connotation here, right? So, is there something about marketing broadly defined skills that global skills that the Japanese companies can benefit from if they can integrate it, right? So is there not creativity maybe, but maybe the numbers driven analysis, or maybe the startup companies here that do customer satisfaction and data work, or is there something that could actually be a meaningful change agent coming from here to there?
That's there pretty much the difficult the question to answer shortly, and yes and no. And we still the respect the impact of the gaijin non-Japanese foreigners, because if you are the expert of the Japanese the practice, that good thing in Japan is always the coming from the beyond the sea. See, we have the language of hakurai. Hakurai is coming from a sea. See, so the good things always coming from the other side of the nation. So from China or from the States, from Europe, we have the very much the strong the basement. Basic, the understanding of that, that belief has not, changed yet. However, some the non-Japanese the companies now use our Japan native or the Japan national, the raising in the States, for example, the American company, they use those, the talent for creative director or marketing communication leads in Japan. So they speak both Japanese, English, and understand, the Japanese better than, the probably other, the people. So that tendency exists. And probably, the Gary, you know something better than me, but the totally foreigner, has limited probably the impact today. That is also I mentioned the many times and coming back many times. But internalization, the internal, the looking, the tendency, probably, working for that.
So let's talk some money, big time dollars, and we have a number of questions, and certainly I have my own questions on the Olympics. And Thomas from Adidas wants to know what the potential cancellation of the 2020's Olympics would have on the domestic business and consumer marketing in Japan. And I'll just add, I'm just going to open up this entire bag, because it turns out that apparently Dentsu is playing a huge role in this entire Olympic marketing. I read that the money raised from the corporate sector for the Tokyo Olympics was the highest ever by a factor of 2. with $3 billion. So Japanese companies have coughed up $3 billion to advertise an event that has then been postponed. And it's not even clear what they get back for those $3 billion, or at least not for all of them. So let's parse this out, right? So is this a disaster? Is it still an opportunity? What happened there? And so Gary, you want to maybe take that first, and then we'll have Cauitie kind of fill in the blanks.
Yeah, and so that number, I believe, is for the domestic sponsorships that were sold through Dentsu, $3 billion. Dentsu made an agency fee of 5% for having all that money that was flowed through it. They also had to staff up to manage it, so there were expenses related to it. But the way I see it is that's $3 billion that could have been deployed elsewhere. So they really sucked up a lot of sponsorship dollars, a lot of sports marketing budgets. That a lot of money was, and it's spent, it's gone. They did come back to the sponsors and have them sign up again. I don't know what the financial details were on that. The information I have, it's likely that the Olympics will happen in some shape or form, unless something unexpected happens in terms of the spread of the COVID virus. I think we will see something happen here. And it could be something huge. Even a scaled down Olympics would be great and give those sponsors exposure. I think domestically, their support of the Olympics has been a good thing for the domestic market. But I think that they haven't got as much bang for their buck spending on the Olympics as they may have done, through more local activations or supporting, local sports or doing things on a smaller scale. Regionally that scale. So it was just sucking up a lot of money. But that's, once we're past this, then we go back to it's a new day. And there are some smaller sports marketing agencies that have been impacted by that because Dentsu has so much control over the Olympics. So once the Olympics is over, the smaller sports marketing agency, I know one of our fellow alums has started a really amazing sports marketing agency in the United States. They're currently doing business in Japan. And hopefully with the Padres signing Yu Darvish, we'll get some more attention on San Diego. But I hope the Olympics happens now in a scaled down and very safe form. But that from a money perspective, it sucked up a lot of marketing dollars.
And the opportunity costs have to be huge, right? So the Olympic sponsors that are not maybe gold, but underneath, basically have just lost out on some other global competitive brand identity or brand push bets, right? And so Cauitie, what do you think? Is there going to be a big impact of this on domestic business and consumer goods marketing?
The short answer is no. It is not necessarily, the big, the impact. Because, there are many, the Japanese, at least, the large, the organization already, the digesting, the possibility of the cancellation of Olympic budget. And so, they are not, they have scenario A and scenario B at the same time in the budget. So I don't think that they worry too much. And the part of the reason is probably they know that it is outside of the marketing, much more the higher level the decision making is working. And that this time, the sponsoring, the Olympic as a, the city of Tokyo, is chiefly because of the, the economy, potentially, see, not the sports, not the marketing, the primarily, the reason of, the hosting, the Olympic Games is definitely the economy. And if I saw it as the Boggles, the book, the things in your the session last week or the 2 weeks ago, the things are changing. The population of the Japan is now start diminishing very rapidly, unfortunately. So the economic the power of Japan itself will probably it is sad thing to say. However, it is the decreasing the over time from now on, say dramatically. If you thinking about China, Korea, and other the Asian the countries, probably Japan has the start the sinking. So the Olympic was hope for government. Olympic Games was the last resort for some people thinking seriously about the economy. However, in this the situation, we are walking on the edge. I'm not in the right the position to say yes or no. However, I recognize that we are walking toward the potential the cancellation. Okay.
So this is a great second to another question that two of our attendants are asking. Blake and John have similar questions. So Blake asks, what is the bleeding edge of marketing practice in Japan today? What there was some mentionings that are big marketing tech stacks and other things, but what is the thing? What is the bleeding edge? And then John asks, for a company looking to approach the Japanese market that doesn't know a lot and doesn't have a lot of relationships, is there some sort of a short of asking Gary for help or Cauitie for that matter, is there a guerrilla marketing strategy that would work in Japan now, maybe a new one?
Can I go first on that?
Please, yeah.
Right. So the bleeding edge, I mentioned as one of my 3 marketing trends is the importance of data and the importance of data literacy for all marketers. But we have access to data and quick response on things that we do, particularly online. A friend of mine has a small marketing agency here called Manzanita. And one of the things that he does is to quickly A/B test creative, get data feedback, dial in the message. People who can utilize data and move quickly, those are the people that are going to win. And I know I'm with you, Cauitie, on slow is good and relationships are important, but we have these bright young people who are really good with data. We have the smaller creative agencies are on the bleeding edge. They're taking risks. They're doing things differently. There's an agency called Ultra Super New, a small agency run by a Dutch guy and a overseas educated Japanese guy. They just did a series of commercials that was recognized as the top commercial campaign of last quarter or whatever. There's a New York led, a guy from New York has established an ad agency here who works, he's a data guy, he's a genius. Company's called Relative, and he comes from a direct marketing background. So there's a lot of people working with data and taking risks. The one thing that's coming down the pipeline, though, is privacy laws around third-party data. And that's going to have a huge impact on what you can and can't do with other people's data. So some of these ad tech and MarTech companies are going to be hugely impacted by that. So I'd keep an eye on that and see what regulatory changes will do to some of these ad tech businesses. So already some people are looking for the exits. On the guerrilla marketing question or not connected, I would look at smaller independent agencies who are willing to do wild and crazy things on lower budgets. And then if you do succeed and become successful here, you want to stick with those agencies. There's another agency that I can't name that's just hired a new managing director that starts next month. He's not an ad agency guy. He's a tech genius. So it's that, you know, the application of technology to marketing keeps marching on. But still, you notice I mentioned creativity and wild ideas. That's one of those things that hasn't changed and that shouldn't change, is the importance of creativity will never go away. And as Cauitie mentioned, human relationships and trust is huge. I hope I answered those questions.
Cauitie, you want to add on this, the bleeding edge? So that's like sort of the thing that's happening.
Well, you know, there. I actually, you know, the line to, you know, the Garys, you know, that been mostly, you know, I was, you know, interested in that, you know, the Gary mentioned about, you know, what did you say in your introduction? You said, you know, the innovation, you know, the service design or innovation or those, you know, the range of, you know, the companies are now, you know, the more visible in the States, sorry, in Japan, right? You know, I think, you know, that is, you know, you know, the good thing. You know, to me, you know, when, you know, the people, you know, mention marketing in Japan, in the States, in China, maybe, you know, the marketing is almost the same as, you know, the selling thing. You know, I'm teaching, you know, marketing in a graduate school today, and you know, the feel the same thing from you know, the people who are working in this university. And however, you know, the marketing means more than, you know, just, you know, the selling thing. And probably in Japan, you know, the marketing is closer to the, you know, the original, in the sense, you know, the having the better relationship and, you know, understanding, you know, the people spending, you know, the money. And, you know, that unfortunately, it's not unfortunate, it's not necessarily only dollar, yen, currency. You know, the people's, you know, the hurt business. So that, you know, the sense probably is the, you know, the stronger in Japan rather than the States. And, you know, the Gary mentioned, you know, the ad tech, you know, the companies are, you know, visible recently. And, you know, I agree to that. It is good sense, and, you know, it is a little bit in the sad sense, because you know, there people think, you know, the company like, you know, the ad tech is the marketing, and it is not, in my opinion.
So I have two more questions. I leave the best for last, which is I'm going to ask you what your favorite recent ad campaign is. But before we close with that question, let me ask one more question that Francis and others have raised, and that is, you mentioned creativity and you mentioned how the people issue is important. Maybe there's a question for Gary on the recruiting side. What do you see in terms of HR changes? But also maybe Cauitie in the large companies. I mean, if you want to have creative people, you can't put them through this lockstep apparatus of lifetime employment, right? I mean, that's a creativity killer if there's ever been one. So do you see any changes in terms of how companies are reacting to the need for new innovative thinking, data capabilities, promoting people that actually know what they're doing, sort of thing? Do you see any changes in the HR practices of the Japanese large marketing companies?
Right. Yeah, I see we're close to time, so I'll keep it short. More and more labor mobility in the market has been a good thing. People are less concerned if you've moved around a few times than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago, so that has changed. There has been lip service paid to diversity and inclusion, but we're not there yet. You heard my rant earlier about discrimination, but diversity and inclusion is a huge thing. one of the big hurdles is there's a bias towards younger people with anything that has to do with digital or technology, and that's a fallacy. There are old guys like Cauitie and myself who are pretty on top of things. And again, that goes back to discrimination, but it's, you know, we all have to continue skilling up, and things are changing very fast, and you can be in your 50s and skill up and change your point of view. But labor mobility has been a good thing for everybody. Everybody wins when it's easier for the pieces to move around.
And
did I miss the second half of the question?
Well, so this Cauitie, you want to? We are approaching the end of the program, but I wanted to give Cauitie maybe a quick comment on the HR thing, and then think about what your favorite ad campaign is right now that we could all YouTube afterwards.
Yeah, I follow the Gary's comment chiefly. By the way, the Gary, do you know what my the major was?
You were an engineer.
I took the MBA. However, I earned my first master's degree in data science.
Yeah.
So if I was the younger, then I could make more money from the
today, yeah,
American company. I miss it.
Okay, so send us off, send the audience off with your advice of which is the best ad campaign that you've seen in a while in Japan that maybe we can find on YouTube. So
for me, it's a few years old now. A couple of things that AIG did with their agency TBWA Hakuhodo, and they did one called Tackle the Risk with the New Zealand All Blacks. And it was a fun commercial. It was a long form video where the players would tackle the people before something bad happens, like getting run over by a car. They also did one with the uniforms of the All Blacks, which are black uniforms, but when you pulled on them to tackle, they created a rainbow color. And they've been big on diversity and inclusion. And that was also an award-winning campaign. So both of those, and that was done by a hybrid, foreign local agency with an international company here, but really fun and engaging, good stuff. AIG, Tackle the Risk.
My short answer is, the Toyota. If you are interested in the current the change of the Japanese society, I recommend you to look at the campaign of Toyota. It is massive, and they're visible, first of all, and the currently the old campaign of Toyota is backed by Toyota's the president, Mr. Akio Toyota. Akio Toyota is a successor of Toyota family, and not only that, he is probably the first person to reveal more, the better understanding of, the marketing and sales, the people.
That's great. I'm going to go and look at that now. That's a great advice. Thank you both. Thank you both for spending an hour with us. And thank you, audience, for being here. See you again next week with a conversation with Richard Samuels at MIT. So thank you, everybody. Stay well. Take good care. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.